He humiliated the nanny for her Italian accent, but the billionaire's arrogant smile froze the instant his own son responded to him with the exact same accent. The Vance estate was less a home and more a monument to wealth, a sprawling mansion of cold marble and glass that overlooked the city like a silent judging god. Every surface was polished to a mirror shine, every piece of art was an investment, and every room was curated to perfection, devoid of the comfortable chaos of family life. This was the world of Alistair Vance, a man who had built an empire on ruthless precision and who expected the same flawlessness in every aspect of his existence, including his 5-year-old son, Leo, and, by extension, the woman who cared for him. Elena Rossi had arrived 6 months prior, a sun-warmed soul from a small village in Tuscany dropped into the sterile chill of Alistair's world. She was kind, patient, and possessed a warmth that seemed to generate its own gravity, pulling young, quiet Leo into her orbit. The boy, who had been a ghost in his own home since his mother's departure, began to bloom under her care. He started to laugh again, a sound so foreign in the cavernous halls that it sometimes made the housekeepers jump. Elena spoke to him in a gentle mix of English and her native Italian, her words weaving a tapestry of comfort and affection that his father's infrequent, clipped sentences could never match. Her English was fluent, but it carried the melodic, rolling cadence of her homeland, an accent that, to Alistair, was like a scratch on a priceless record. Tonight, the mansion was at its most intimidating. Alistair was hosting a dinner party for a select group of investors and business magnates, the kind of evening where fortunes were decided over canapés and whispered conversations. The most important guest was Mr. Fabrizio Romano, an old-money Italian tycoon whose partnership could elevate Alistair's latest venture from a success into a legacy. Alistair had been preparing for this night for weeks, ensuring every detail was impeccable. The flowers were flown in from Holland, the chef from a Michelin-starred restaurant in Paris, and the wine was from a vintage that cost more than a family car. Everything had to be perfect. Elena was tasked with keeping Leo occupied and out of sight. The boy was to be fed, bathed, and put to bed long before the first clink of champagne glasses. As she knelt by his bed, reading him a story, she could hear the faint murmur of elegant voices drifting up from the grand foyer. Leo was restless, his small body buzzing with the unusual energy in the house. "Can I see Papa's friends?" he asked, his wide, curious eyes fixed on the door. "Not tonight, tesoro," Elena soothed, stroking his hair. "It is a grown-up party. We will have our own party tomorrow, just you and me, con gelato." "With ice cream?" he whispered, his excitement building. "See, with all the chocolate sauce you want," she promised, her voice a soft, musical hum. She switched to Italian, singing him a lullaby her grandmother used to sing to her, a simple, sweet melody about little stars and sleepy sheep. It was a song that smelled of lavender fields and warm bread, a piece of her home she gifted to the boy each night. Just as Leo's eyelids began to droop, the bedroom door swung open with a sharp, commanding push. Alistair stood there, silhouetted against the bright hallway light, his tuxedo tailored to within an inch of its life. His face, usually a mask of detached control, was tight with irritation. "What is that noise?" he demanded, his voice a low, sharp blade. "I could hear it from the hallway. It sounds like a cat being strangled." Elena immediately fell silent, her hand freezing on Leo's back. She felt a hot blush creep up her neck. She stood slowly, a silent apology in her posture. "I am sorry, Mr. Vance. I was just singing Leo to sleep." Alistair's eyes narrowed, his gaze sweeping over her with disdain. Singing in that language. I've told you before, Elena, I want my son exposed to proper English. Clear, concise, unadulterated English, not these provincial folk songs. He gestured dismissively with a perfectly manicured hand. Your accent is thick enough as it is. We don't need him picking it up. The word provincial stung more than he could ever know. It was a deliberate jab, meant to remind her of her place, to reduce her rich heritage to a backward, uncultured caricature. She had heard similar comments before, whispered behind her back at the school gates by other nannies, or uttered in a clipped, condescending tone by Alistair himself. But to have him say it so cruelly over the simple lullaby meant for his son felt like a violation. "I apologize, sir," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "I did not mean to disturb you." "You did disturb me," he snapped. "You disturbed the entire floor. Mr. Romano is arriving any minute, and the last thing I need is the sound of some peasant tune echoing through my home." He adjusted his cufflinks, his expression one of pure disgust. "See to it that the boy is asleep and stays that way. I will not have any interruptions tonight." Without another word, he turned on his heel and left, closing the door with a soft, final click that echoed the slamming of a vault. Elena stood frozen for a moment, the insult hanging in the air like bitter smoke. She looked down at Leo, who was now wide awake, his eyes filled with a confusion that broke her heart. He had heard the venom in his father's tone, if not the words themselves. She took a deep breath, pushing her own hurt aside, and gave him a reassuring smile. "It is okay, Piccolo. Let's try again." She hummed the melody softly this time, her voice a little shakier, until Leo finally drifted into a troubled sleep. Downstairs, the party was in full swing. Laughter, as polished and artificial as the marble floors, floated through the air. Alistair was the perfect host, gliding from group to group, a charming smile fixed on his face. He finally cornered his prize, Fabrizio Romano. Mr. Romano was a man in his late 60s, with a face like a Roman bust and eyes that had seen everything. He was polite but reserved, his old-world sensibilities clashing with the brash, modern ambition of Alistair's circle. Alistair launched into his well-rehearsed pitch, speaking of market projections and synergistic growth. Mr. Romano listened, nodding occasionally, but his gaze kept drifting, a polite disinterest clouding his features. Desperate to build a connection, Alistair decided to play the culture card. "I've always had a great admiration for your country, Fabrizio," Alistair said, his tone oozing false sincerity. He then attempted a phrase in Italian he'd practiced with a tutor. "Il mio affare è il migliore," he said, which he thought meant, "My business is the best." His pronunciation was atrocious, mangling the vowels and stressing the wrong syllables. Mr. Romano's eyebrow twitched almost imperceptibly. The phrase was grammatically clumsy and sounded arrogant. It was the kind of textbook Italian a tourist would use to haggle for a cheap souvenir, not what one businessman would say to another. "Is that so?" Mr. Romano replied, in perfect, crisp English, his voice dry. The conversation faltered. Alistair could feel the deal and the evening slipping through his fingers. His guests were watching, and the palpable tension was a stain on his perfect party. He was failing. It was at that moment that a small figure appeared at the top of the grand staircase. It was Leo, dressed in his silk pajamas, his favorite stuffed bear clutched in his hand. He had woken up from a bad dream and was looking for the one person in the house who could offer him comfort, Elena. A collective gasp went through the room. Alistair's face turned thunderous. This was the ultimate humiliation. His son appearing disheveled in front of the most important people in his professional life. He was about to hiss for a housekeeper to snatch the boy away when Leo started down the stairs, his eyes scanning the crowd of strangers. He spotted Mr. Romano, perhaps drawn to the man's kind, grandfatherly face. He walked directly toward him, his small feet silent on the thick Persian rug. Alistair opened his mouth to intervene, to apologize, to do something, but he was frozen in a state of horrified shock. The room had gone completely silent. Leo stopped a few feet from the Italian tycoon, his expression serious and composed. He looked Mr. Romano directly in the eye, gave a small, polite bow of his head, and then he spoke. His voice was clear and childish, yet the words that came out were anything but. "Buonasera, signore," he said, his Italian flowing and natural. "Mi dispiace disturbare. Spero che la serata sia di suo gradimento." A stunned silence fell over the room. Alistair felt the blood drain from his face. But it wasn't just that his son was speaking flawless Italian. It was the way he was speaking it. It was the accent. The gentle rolling R's, the soft melodic lilt at the end of the sentence. It wasn't the crisp formal Italian of Rome or Milan. It was the warm, earthy dialect of Tuscany. It was Elena's accent, the provincial accent he had so viciously mocked less than an hour ago. Mr. Romano's stern face broke into a wide, astonished smile. His eyes lit up with genuine delight. He crouched down to Leo's level, his demeanor transforming from a wary businessman to a charmed grandfather. He replied to Leo in the very same dialect, his own voice softening, losing its formal edge. "Ma ciao, giovanotto, non disturbi affatto. Anzi, hai reso la serata molto più interessante," he said, chuckling. "Well, hello, young man. You are not disturbing at all. In fact, you have made the evening much more interesting." He glanced at Leo's bear. "Is he your business partner?" Leo giggled, a pure, happy sound that filled the silent room. "No, this is Marco. He protects me from monsters." The exchange continued, a rapid, joyful back and forth in the dialect Mr. Romano had grown up with, but rarely heard in these sterile international business circles. It was a sound of home, a connection he never expected to find in Alistair Vance's cold American mansion. Alistair stood there, utterly paralyzed, a statue carved from pure mortification. His guests were staring, not at the charming boy, but at him. He could see the whispers begin without a sound, a raised eyebrow between two investors, a hand subtly covering a smirk. He saw their expressions shift from surprise to a kind of pitying amusement that was far worse than outright scorn. He, the master of this universe, the conductor of this perfect symphony of power, had been completely upstaged by his 5-year-old son and the nanny he belittled. The deal he had tried to secure with blustering pitches and clumsy memorized phrases had just been forged by a child's sincerity and the very culture he had dismissed as peasant. His gaze lifted from his son and found Elena. She was standing in the shadows of the arched doorway leading to the kitchens, having come to find Leo. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't gloating. Her expression was one of quiet dignity. Her eyes filled with a fierce pride for the little boy speaking her language, her accent. In that moment, Alistair saw it all with sickening clarity. He hadn't just insulted his son's nanny. He had insulted the very source of the warmth and authenticity that had just captivated the most important man in the room. He had laughed at the one thing of real value in his perfectly curated, empty home. The billionaire's derisive laughter had died in his throat, replaced by a silence that was louder and more humiliating than any words could ever be. What about you? What would you do if you were in this father's shoes? Let me know what you think in the comments.